We're halfway through the year, and that means we are halfway through our Goodreads goals, or, if you're like me, several books behind. But I have read books this year, so let's talk about them. We're gonna start with some stats, and I have been MIA for a little bit. That is because I had a really bad period of anxiety, and then I went on vacation, and then work got really chaotic, and now it's July. So, if you didn't know, I work full-time as a graphic designer, but all of that means that I am currently 7 books behind my Goodreads goal. My goal for this year was 60 books because last year I read like 65 or something, and I have read 24 so far this year. If you have any recommendations of books that you read that you really like this year, please leave them down below. I'm in desperate need of a book that like really grips me, makes me feel something. But so far this year, I've only had one 5-star book, which we will talk about, and a lot of 4-star books, which isn't bad, but I really want that like 5-star book feeling. And I think the longest book I read this year was House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas, which is not surprising. And then the shortest book I read this year, we're going to talk about also in this, but it is Small Things Like These. So getting into our mid-year book tag, the first question is the best book you read in 2024, which is going to be the only book that I gave 5 stars this year, and that is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I was expecting this to be a 5-star, so I'm very glad it lived up to my expectations. I love Emily Henry. I will read anything she writes, but this one was so fun. I love Tappy Place. It is also a 5-star book for me, but that book made me cry. It made me so emotional, and it's honestly one I don't know if I can ever reread. This is one I will definitely be rereading. It's just so fun, and the concept of this is Daphne and Miles move in together after both their partners break up with them to be together. So Daphne kind of starts fake dating Miles, who is her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex, if you're following. And it's basically just them having a summer of fun together and getting to know each other, and it's again like all Emily Henry books, witty, real, human, and I love it so much. The banter in this book was amazing. So this is my only 5-star book this year. I did reread ACOTAR in January, and A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin I also gave 5 stars, but like I'd already given them 5 stars, so I feel like it doesn't really count. So the next book, the next question is the best sequel you've read so far this year, and I think I'm gonna say Killer Instinct, which is part of the Natural series. I really enjoyed that series. I think I have the first book somewhere. Yeah. I really love the series. I sped through it. It was so fast-paced, so easy to read. Jennifer Lynn Barnes' writing is so digestible, and it goes by really fast because she also has really short chapters, which I love. And this is basically about a bunch of teenagers that work for the FBI to help solve cold cases because they all have like these kind of unnaturally good abilities at like reading people and stuff like that. There's 4 books in this series, and I read all of them in like 2 weeks, and I really enjoyed every single one of them. The next question is new release you haven't read yet but want to. First one for me is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I am a huge Leigh Bardugo fan. I've read pretty much all her books, and I have no doubt I'm going to love this. I just am a little bit intimidated by it. It seems like it's probably gonna take me a bit to get into. Also, this book is so beautiful. It has black sprayed edges and then these like really cool pomegranate end papers. I honestly don't really know what this is about, but it's set in Madrid, and it's a fantasy of sorts. Lucia plunges into a world of seers and alchemists, holy men and hucksters, where the lines between magic, science, and fraud are never certain. Another new release that I really want to read is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I have read pretty much every book she's ever written, and I love her writing. It's super fast-paced, really easy for me to read. And I've heard kind of mixed things about it because apparently it's more like, it leans more into erotica than her other books, but I'm still gonna read it. Next question. The biggest surprise. I have 2 for this one also. First was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This I didn't have any expectations for. It is set in the Omegaverse, apparently. I did not really know what that was until I read this book, and this is a very tame version of it compared to what I'm sure is on AO3. But this is about Misery, who is a vampire, and Lo, who is a werewolf, and it's a werewolf vampire romance, and I ate this up. It was so fun. This was like a 4.5-star book for me. Could not put it down, and I will happily read more books in this genre if she continues to write them. And the next one, again because I went into it with no expectations, was Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha J. Tooley, and this is another like fantasy romance book. It is about Lore, who ends up in the Sun Queen trials, so she's competing against a bunch of other women to marry the Sun King basically, and there's a bunch of different courts in this universe, and the Sun King is like one of the big courts, and she's basically just like plucked out of prison and thrown into these trials, and she doesn't really understand why, and we learn like a whole lot. And there's dual POV in this. The other POV is not the Sun King, it is a different guy. So I think it's like a slow burn, enemies to lovers type situation. I'm currently reading the second book and I really enjoyed this. I gotta be honest, I don't remember much about it because I read this in the 24-hour readathon and that is a blur in my brain. But it was really good and I haven't really heard anyone talk about it. Next up, biggest disappointments. I'm so sorry to anyone that loved this book, but for me, I'm gonna say When in Rome. I think it's Sarah Adams. I don't have it. I read it on my Kindle. I'm really glad I didn't buy it because it was just not for me. I found it like very hard to get through, pretty cringy, and just like not really my cup of tea when it comes to romance. I think I prefer romance that feels a little bit more adult. Like the characters are adults, but they weren't really acting like adults to me. It felt like they were kind of acting like teenagers, and it was kind of frustrating. And I'd heard so many good things about it, so I went into it I think with really high expectations. But I think maybe Sarah Adams is just not the writer for me, and that is okay. And then next question, favorite author, debut or new to you? I only read one new author, I think, so far this year, which I need to work on that. But that is Claire Keegan, Small Things Like These. I picked this book up at Shakespeare & Co. when I was in Paris, and I'd heard good things about this, but I had never seen it anywhere in Canada, so it was cool to be able to get it. And I read this on the plane on the way home. I read it in one sitting, and I honestly could not tell you really what this book is about, but I really liked it. Her writing is very beautiful. It makes like the most mundane natural things seem so mystical. This is like a really short book too. It's literally like 100 pages. I read it in like an hour, but it's set in 1985 in an Irish town, and it's about Bill, who is a coal and timber merchant, and he encounters the complicit silences of a people controlled by the church. I honestly think I need to like research more about this book and like the ending of it because it was very open-ended and I feel like you're supposed to kind of like really take something away from it, but I was really captivated by this. The newest fictional crush for this one, I'm going to say, I know his name, Jacob from Yours Truly. I love this book so much. This is one of my favorite romances I've read in a long time, which is crazy because I did not think I liked Abby Jimenez as a writer because I really hated The Friend Zone, but I loved this book and I love Jacob. He has like social anxiety, so when he starts his new job, him and the main character Brianna kind of get off on the wrong foot and they start writing each other letters, and it's so sweet and so beautiful, and it was depicted so well, like him being more of an introverted, anxious person, and he's my dream man, honestly. So, book that made you cry. Number 1, House of Flame and Shadow. I honestly don't remember when in that book I cried, but it was probably often, honestly, because it's like kind of like the finale of the series. Even though overall it wasn't necessarily my favorite book, I'm very attached to that world and those characters, and they went through a lot in it, and that made me cry. And then surprisingly, I recently finished Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. This made me cry. I did not go into a Riley Sager book expecting to cry, okay? But this book it really surprised me in like a really fun way because it almost had like a feel-good ending, which you don't expect from a thriller book, especially like Riley Sager writes pretty creepy stories. It always kind of borders on like, is it supernatural or is it not supernatural, which I love. And this one has that, but like it ends in like a pretty positive way. It just made me emotional. So I really enjoyed this book, and it felt pretty different from a lot of thrillers that I read, which is cool. Book that made you happy. It's actually really sad that I struggled to come up with what book to pick for this, but I ended up just going with my ACOTAR reread. I love this series so much. It really was kind of like one of the first things I read getting back into reading. It's such a good fantasy romance. I love the world, I love the characters, and rereading specifically A Court of Mist and Fury. I love this book. This is a 6-star book for me. I will eat it up every single time. And then most beautiful book that you have bought or received this year has to be this copy of The Lightning Thief, which I think I showed in a book haul when I got it, but it has like lightning bolt sprayed edges and it's like gold foil and it's so beautiful. Even the inside of it, like the pages, are really nice if it's focusing. And I would love to read this copy of The Lightning Thief, but I'm also scared to read this copy of The Lightning Thief because I have like the OG covers and it's like tattered because I've read it so many times and I've had it since I was like 8 years old. So this book though, I'm obsessed with it and it is on display in my room. Books that I need to read by the end of the year, I have quite a few, I'm gonna be honest. First things first, genuinely like bully me because I need to read this. It's been on my TBR for like 2 years straight. Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I think I'm gonna love this book. I honestly think this could be a 5-star book for me. Why do I keep putting it off? I don't know. I think it's like a second chance romance, like dual timeline type situation, which I think is why I'm hesitant because I don't necessarily love that trope, but it's about books and I've heard it's really beautiful and it's so many people's like favorite romance romance, so I need to read this. I also need to read Once Upon a Broken Heart because I read Caraval for the purpose of reading this series, and I didn't even like Caraval, which is maybe why this is giving me pause now, but I own it. I own the entire series, so I have to read it. And then also, I would like to finish the Chestnut Springs series this year. I have read the first 3, so I have Reckless and Hopeless left, and that's not gonna be a problem. I love these books. I have this on my TBR for July, and I'm very excited to read it. And then our next question is, how many 5-star reads did you have this year? And like I said, I have had 1 technically because ACOTAR doesn't really count. That is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I am praying for more 5-star reads in the second half of the year. And then books you want to reread this year. I really want to reread Fourth Wing and Iron Flame before Onyx Storm comes out, which, by the way, have you seen the cover reveal? Because it is a gorgeous book. I pre-ordered it, like the special edition, and it has like the dragon sprayed edges, and I cannot wait to get it. But anyway, I love the series, and I don't remember that much about what happens in the first book because I read it a year ago now, so by the time Onyx Storm comes out, I feel like I'm gonna have no memory of it. So I'm excited to reread the first 2 books, probably closer to when it comes out in like December or something. And then 5-star predictions for the rest of the year. I feel like The 7-Year Slip is gonna be a 5-star book, and I need to read it. It's on my TBR for this month, but it's also been on my TBR for the last 2 months, so I'm hoping I'm gonna get to it this time, and I genuinely really do think this is gonna be at least a 4-star, if not 5 stars for me. I have heard literally nothing but good things. I feel like I haven't even seen anyone give this lower than like 4.5 stars. I have pretty high expectations, which is maybe not great going into a book if you're looking for a 5-star read, but I feel like I feel like it will be. And another one I feel like could be a 5-star read, I have The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary, and I am obsessed with Beth O'Leary's writing. The Flatshare is one of my 5-star books, and I read The Wake Up Call, and that's like a 4.5-star book for me, so I have hope that this could also be 5 stars. And there's also a question about most anticipated release for the second half of the year, but I honestly don't know. I'm excited to read the next book in like the Inheritance Games universe, but I'm not like super excited about it. And I'm still trying to decide if I'm gonna read Reckless, which is the sequel to Powerless, because I didn't love this book, but I'm kind of curious what happened. So I think that book's out now though, Reckless, so I might read it. I don't know. We'll see. I forgot to mention Wrath of the Triple Goddess by Rick Riordan, because if I am anything, I'm a Percy Jackson fan. So this is probably my most anticipated release for the rest of the year. Let me know your answers to any of these questions down below. Please give me any recommendations of good books you've read this year. I need it. I really do. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking around. And I just love talking about books with people. So if you enjoyed, you can subscribe down below, give it a like. It would mean so much to me, and I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye.